Hi everybody, my name is Catherine. I am a transition and wellness coach for foreigners in Japan. And today I am here at the Tokyo English Lifeline, better known as TEL, and I'm sitting down with one of the directors, Vickie Skorji. And we're going to be talking a little bit about how TEL supports the mental health and well-being of the English-speaking community here in Japan. So for this interview, we're actually going to split up into different parts. So the first part, we're going to talk about what does TEL do in general and how they can support you. And then we're going to talk about the most common types of treatments or reasons why people come to TEL. And we're going to answer some questions that we've received in advance from people who want to know a little bit more about the clinic side. So let's go ahead and get started. So Vickie, thank you so much for having me. And can you tell me a little bit about what your background is in counseling and also how you got involved with TEL?
Right. So my background is in neuropsychology a long time ago. And what got me working at TEL is that when I moved here in 2001, I spent my first 3 years settling my kids into school and doing various other activities, and then someone introduced me to the Lifeline. And one of the difficulties that I had with my qualifications was back, if you think about the turn of the century, around that time, you think about the internet and you think about online courses and you think about getting supervision remotely, and it really wasn't possible. So I really struggled to keep my license active. So I lost my ability to do neuropsychology or neuropsychological testing, and so I wasn't sure that I could do anything in Japan. And someone introduced me to the Lifeline, and I started off there and did their training again, and worked my way up from doing that to training the phone counsellors. I was a therapist, not as a neuropsychologist, but a therapist at the clinic for about 5 or 6 years. And the last few years I've been running the Lifeline. So lots of different ways I've been involved.
Yeah, that's really great. So you were talking about the Lifeline, and we were also talking beforehand about the clinic. Mm-hmm. So my understanding is that the Tokyo English Lifeline, there's the Lifeline side, then mm-hmm. there are the counseling sessions that you can take part in, as well as the outreach programs. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit briefly about what each of those are?
Right. So TEL used to be called, as you said, Tokyo English Lifeline. It was primarily just an English language lifeline that grew out of Inochi no Denwa, which we are still a member of, and that's the Japanese lifeline. And that started in 1973. And that was there to help people that might be feeling suicidal, but also for people back then when you really didn't have the internet. And how did you find a doctor? How did you find a lawyer? How did you find things that you might need, right? So we had a wealth of information and resources that we were giving out to people. Then one of the things that we struggled with over the years was, well, we found these people in crisis, but here in Japan, how someone is licensed and who is able to practice isn't really regulated, right? So I was mentioning I lost my license. It was very strict about it in Australia, what I can and what I can't do. And so you can have people practicing in Japan who may look like they've got a whole string of qualifications behind them. Right. Their license is inactive, they are not up to date with best practice, or perhaps they've even got a malpractice suit against them.
Oh no.
Yes. So how would you know that? How would you know who's credible and who's doing best practice? So the Lifeline was finding all these people, and it didn't know who to give them to for that next level, right? Who do we refer them to? So in 1991, it expanded to develop TEL counselling. Okay. And everyone that worked at TEL counselling was meant to be, and is, fully licensed and accredited with a licensing body in their own home country. And not only that, that they are keeping that license active, which means that they must be doing ongoing education and training points to keep their license up to date. Right. So we found them, we had somewhere to give them, and that's TEL counselling. And then we wanted to do things that help build resilience, right? So not just catch them at that point where the lifeline's at, where they're in crisis. What could we do to build resilience? And that's what all those outreach activities are about. And they've happened in the last 5 to 6 years perhaps, if you like. So on the Lifeline, they're only providing services in English because there are 47 other branches of Inochin Denwa that are helping in every prefecture around the country. So we're the only one in English. But when we do face-to-face counselling or distance counselling or psychological assessments in the clinic, that can be done in Chinese, Spanish, if we have it French, it's in Japanese and English, so it's many languages. Right. And when it comes to the outreach programs, that's also delivered in many languages. And we have clinics right around the country, and we have phone rooms around the country, and our chat is all around the country. So we're not just in Tokyo, our services are not just in English, and we're not just a Lifeline. Yes. So we're no longer that Tokyo English Lifeline, but because we've been around for such a long time, we've sort of kept that name TEL.
I'm really glad to hear that, because I think when I was first hearing about TEL, I was only really thinking about the Lifeline itself. So it's really good to know that you have so many outreach programs and also counseling that's available to people. And I also completely agree that it's so much better if you can help people along with their transition or their experience in Japan before they reach the point of crisis.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how many counselors do you have here, and also just staff in general who are helping with the outreach programs and volunteer work? What is the size of the amount of people who are helping here?
Okay, so when you talk about counsellors, that's a specific name that can only be given to a professional.
Okay.
Right? So when we talk about the therapists that are working at the clinic, I think there's about 15 or 16 here in Tokyo. There's 2 or 3 down in Kyoto, and I think there's about 10 in Okinawa. So on that professional side, that's how many clinicians we have, something like that. And for running the Lifeline service, we have currently about 120 volunteers.
Oh, 120 volunteers. Wow, that is quite a bit.
It takes a lot of people to run a Lifeline.
Yeah, I bet.
And that's not even 24 hours.
Okay. So for the counseling side, what are the topics that you counsel here?
At the clinic?
At the clinic.
Right. So at the clinic they will do individual counselling. They will do couples counselling.
Okay.
They will do family counselling. They will do educational assessments. They will do neuropsychological assessments, and they will do distance therapy. Now they're the if you like the client bases that they'll see, and within that they'll do a whole range of issues. It could be grief and loss, it could be eating disorders, it could be helping a child that's got ADHD. It depends, right? It's very large.
Okay, so the counseling that you do in the clinic side is also for children as well as adults?
Correct.
Okay, that's good to know. So what would you say are the top maybe 3 main reasons why foreigners in Japan or expats would come to TEL?
It's the same for anybody.
Yes.
The leading mental health issues are anxiety and depression.
Okay.
Now what brings on that anxiety or that depression can be many different things. So it could be moving to a new country, it could be harassment in your workplace, it could be a breakup or a relationship issue, it could be that you've lost your job, right? It could be many different things, right? And as a foreigner in Japan, you may not have a lot of resources and that extended family and those extended resources to back you up. And even more so if you're a family and you've come across here for a placement or a term here, and one of your children is having difficulties, then that's a big struggle as well, right? So for those sorts of things are generally the main reasons. Right.
I always felt that one of the main reasons, at least I hear of when I work with people, is just a feeling of isolation or kind of trying to rediscover what their purpose is here or your identity in a new context.
Right. So a lot of people can come to Japan and they might have this expectation that I'm going to be in a big city and I'm going to meet all these people, but maybe you actually get placed in a rural area and it's nothing like that. Yes. Or you find the language harder than you thought. or you're in a big city, but really nobody's sort of saying hello to you, right? And that's quite isolating. So you can come with a lot of different expectations to what really happens here, right? The language isn't easy, right? And there aren't all of those sorts of support services and, if you like, infrastructure that would help someone if they were struggling with maybe health issues or legal issues in a foreign language here, right? So if things are going well, it's not a problem, but you run into any difficulties and it can be really challenging, and you may feel you don't have a lot of rights, and how do you even go about finding out what they are?
Exactly, it's really hard to find the right resources.
Correct.
And find the right people to ask. So what would you say is something that we would find surprising about the mental health of at least the foreigners who are here in Japan?
I don't know about necessarily that you would find that was different, but maybe you are not thinking about just how many people have a mental health problem. So maybe I'll give you those sort of facts, and that is that 1 in 4 of us will have a mental health problem at some point in our life. So if you think about that, it's either, if you and I do not have a mental health problem, we're going to know somebody that does, right? But will we know what it looked like? Probably not. Will we know how to support them? Probably not. 1 in 5 people in the workplace have a mental health problem. Okay, so it's not all, when you think of a mental health problem, you think that somebody is not capable of working. When you think that 1 in 5 people in the workplace have a mental health problem, then that sort of may change your perception of what someone with a mental health problem looks like. The other thing that I think is really important to know that a lot of people don't know, and that is that 50% of all mental health problems occur before we're 14. And 75% before we're 24.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And do most parents know what a mental health problem looks like? Do they know where to get support, right? So more often than not, people have had some sort of mental health difficulties when they were younger, struggled with it, didn't really understand it, didn't really get the supports that they needed. And then later on in life, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a work, maybe it's some other stresses come along, and it exacerbates the situation, and it happens again.
So they carry it along with them.
Correct. But they haven't learned how, they haven't learned to recognize what it is. They haven't learned how to manage it. And so they feel that shame that I'm failing again, and I don't want to feel like that.
So one thing I've been curious about is how many people in general, at least for the clinical side, would come for counseling maybe on a weekly basis? Yeah. And also the same for the Lifeline, how many people would you say are generally calling in on a weekly basis?
So for our clinic here in Tokyo, I think they do about 300 to 400 hours a month. So you can do the maths across that. And for the Lifeline, we did last year we did 8,800 calls or chats, and we can only do we only have one line open at any point, right? I only have one phone counselor at a time, or support worker, one support worker, or one chat worker at a time. So it's a little bit tricky for me to say, well, how many call on a day? Because if I have someone who's suicidal, I might be talking to them for a bit longer than if somebody's just calling up for some resources. But roughly it would be about, we do about 150 to 200 calls in a week.
In a week?
With one person.
That's a much larger volume than I was thinking. So I think right now we can get into some of the questions that were asked beforehand. So some people were looking for more detail about the clinical side. So let me go through that right now. Okay, so the first one is, what are the costs involved with the Lifeline and also with the counseling, if any?
So the Lifeline is the cost of, if you're using your phone, it's the cost of a call, right? We don't charge for that service. If it's chat, it's entirely free. If you've got internet, it's free, right? For the clinic, it runs on a sliding scale fee. So there is our top fee, and I think that's about 20,000 yen, and it slides all the way down to, I think, about 7,000 yen. and that's means tested, and it's looked at your income and it's looked at your circumstances.
Okay.
Right. But at that 7,000 yen, we're losing, right? So that's a service to the community, and it's always a struggle for us as to how much of that subsidised care can we provide for the community, and how much can we afford for the Lifeline. So it's a tricky business, right?
Okay, so people kind of have to be assessed beforehand. Okay. The next one would be, are there any specialties that counselors are trained in, specifically around EMDR, lifeline integration, and cognitive restructuring therapy?
Right. So I'm not sure about the cognitive restructuring therapy or the, what was that other one? Lifeline integration?
Lifeline integration.
I've not really heard of those schools of discipline. Okay, maybe they're quite new. But the EMDR, we do have people that are trained in that. You know, there are always new, if you like, branches coming off CBT, which is cognitive behavioural therapy, or rational emotive therapy were the original ones of those. That's where your mindfulness comes from. That's where your acceptance commitment therapy treatment comes from. You know, so I think maybe cognitive restructuring is a branch of that. Okay, and many of the clinicians are trained in that. Some are trained in different disciplines, maybe family therapy. Some are trained in educational assessment, and some are trained in doing neuropsychological assessments. So some can actually give you that diagnosis and can give you that treatment plan that would go with you for that diagnosis if you had maybe ADHD, or maybe you had a child on the autism spectrum or something like that. And others would be more helping you sort of work out, okay, maybe you've got some anxiety, or you've got some depression, or you've got some other grief and loss issues, and how do you work through that, and what tools can we give you to support you?
I see. So in some cases, some people might just come for a general counseling session, and they might realize that there could be other testing or things that they should take advantage of.
Depending on what it is, right.
Okay.
And you know, you might be coming for eating disorders, or you might be coming for something that's trauma related. So again, you'd be looking at, well, what is the best practice for these situations?
Okay, thank you. So the next one is, do you provide any mental health testing? So this is basically coming off of what we just talked about. Yes. So one person was actually asking about things like IQ tests, ADHD tests, and GAD tests.
Right. So they're just part of either a educational assessment, or it could be part of your neuropsychological assessment, depending on what it is that you're looking for. And sometimes, and so there'll be, you know, how big a test do you want done, right? And so that's going to take more time, and that might cost more, right? So sometimes parents need a certain type of testing to get certain supports from the school. So it might depend on the situation.
Okay, perfect. So I'm glad we cleared that about the testing as well. So you were talking about how you do support children, but I was wondering, do you offer any support for children or parents of children who have special needs?
Right, so some of those things that you're talking about, autism that needs special needs, ADHD needs special needs, there's a whole range of either developmental disorders that children might need support with. And we have, not in addition to the testing and the counselling and the family therapy, we have a parent support group that we support. We have educational workshops that we offer to educators as well as parents, because the whole system is going to need to support this child if it's to succeed. So we do a lot of work in these areas.
For children. Okay, perfect. Okay, so have you ever counseled people who have grown up third culture? So people who have grown up living in different countries and maybe are trying to understand their sense of identity?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, I have.
Okay, that was yes. Okay, perfect. And what kind of training do you offer for people who want to be a Lifeline volunteer?
Right. So if somebody wanted to work on our Lifeline, and we always need these people. They are what keep our Lifeline going. Our volunteers, many of them are foreign, so they're always leaving the country. So we run trainings twice a year, and typically they're in the fall and the spring.
Right.
And they run for about 10 weeks. And we try to make that as flexible as possible. So there are only 3 sessions that are mandatory that you need to come to, and they're on a weekend. We offer them in one of the training sessions on a Saturday and on the other ones on a Sunday. So if you work on a Saturday, you can come to the one later in the year. And then after, and in between that, many of the sessions are done online, right?
Oh, okay.
So we try to make it as easy and as flexible as possible for people. And then once they finish that training, then what they start is, we call it an apprenticeship on the line, where they are, if you like, observing shifts, and after they've done their protocols, then they're taking calls and we're supporting them. And that goes on for a few months until we feel that they're okay to go on by themselves, and then they go solo. So all in all, it takes them about 5 months.
5 months. Okay.
Before they're on the line by themselves.
Okay, so it's a pretty detailed training, but I'm glad to hear that people are well trained.
Because they can be asked a question on anything.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? So how to support someone and know about what are the services here to link them in with is really important. Particularly when you're talking about services in a foreign language and letting them know what their rights are.
Okay, absolutely. So I did receive one other question, and that was within the counseling that you do for couples, do you also handle couples who are from different nationalities, so they're dealing with intercultural differences in their marriage?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you can have a number of our therapists are bilingual, right? So they could be helping either of the members of the couple in a language that they prefer, or then helping them integrate that as well.
Oh, that's really great. So they have a chance to kind of explain themselves in their own, the language they feel more comfortable in.
Correct.
Okay, and then come to a better
Right.
conclusion together. Okay, wow, that's really great. Okay, so that's it for all of the questions that we've had.
Okay.
So I am curious, if someone was interested in coming, let's say, to the clinic side for counseling, what can they expect in terms of operation? So how would they make an appointment, and what can they expect on their first time coming here?
Right, so if they are interested in doing some counselling, the first thing that they can do is go onto our website, and you fill out an application there for counselling, and in there it'll talk to you about, well, what have you been, what are your concerns, what sort of support would you like, what is your availability, and then if you haven't made a requirement, you can have a look on our website about all of the different therapists and their backgrounds. If you haven't sort of said, this is who I think would be a good match, then we will do our best to sort of look at your availability and the issues that you've raised, and who do we think is going to be a good fit for you.
Okay, that's really great. So it's good to know that there's kind of like a questionnaire that people can go through, so they're paired up with the right person.
Correct.
Ideally.
And that would also talk to them about the fee structures and all those sorts of things. And so that might take about a week, and then you come in for your first appointment. Now sometimes your first appointment can be a little bit longer because the therapist might be doing a little bit more of an in-depth intake with you.
Okay. Okay. So also, what would you say to someone who's shy about coming? And I'm curious about this because I think that there's probably a lot of things that TEL can assist with, but maybe you don't feel like your issue is bad enough to come see someone. So again, one of the topics I brought up before was feelings of isolation when you're living in a new country. I think many people think that maybe that's just the norm to experience. So if something is a normal experience, does that mean it's something that you would need to reach out to someone for? So if someone's feeling kind of like, oh, I think I need to talk to someone, but I'm not sure if it's bad enough to come, or I'm kind of shy about getting involved, what would you say to that?
I would say come and talk to someone, because if we had concerns about our physical health, we would go and follow up about it, right? But when it comes to our mental health, we feel somehow we've got to snap out of it or figure it out ourselves. But when it's thoughts and feelings, right, that we're struggling to understand, how are we going to think our way out of it? It never makes sense.
Right.
That's where the cognitive distortion is, right?
Yeah.
Right. So think about it. Even if you're unsure about it, think about coming and having a massage for your mind.
A
right?
massage for your mind. Oh, I love it.
By the same token,
yes.
if you get onto these mental health problems earlier on, the majority of people get better within 3 to 6 months. So the longer that you leave it, right, the more damage it's probably done to you physically, and the more damage it's probably done in your life around you.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. I can see that trying to leave things festering it's probably not going to have an outcome. Like some things might not necessarily get better just with time. Sometimes talking to someone would definitely be helpful. Okay, so is there anything else that you wanted to add? Anything that we haven't covered?
Right. So maybe sort of adding on to what we were just talking about, and that is that in Japan there's such a stigma about mental health, and a lot of that comes from a lack of understanding about what it is. Right. And so you might have come from another country where there was some discussion about it and some awareness of it, but you're feeling here when you're in Japan, oh, really, I shouldn't be dealing with these issues. I should somehow be better. No, you were taught better in your own home countries. Come and get some support, because what ends up happening in Japan is that so many people, who are struggling with depression, end up taking their lives because they're not getting treatment. And one of the more common aspects of depression is thoughts of suicide. We call that suicidal ideation. So thoughts that you are useless, thoughts that you are worthless, that you're a burden to everybody, that people would be better off if you weren't here, right? So that is not normal, right? That is your illness talking. If you have any of those thoughts, either reach out to our Lifeline or come in and make an appointment, because you can get better and you will get better, right? That's an illness talking, right? And there's help for that.
Absolutely. So how can people find you online? So we were talking about your website or getting in touch with the Lifeline. So what is the website, and also how can they connect with you on social media?
Right. So we have our own Facebook page, so they can, and a Twitter page, so you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. You can call the Lifeline, or you can, got the numbers here, right? So you can call that Lifeline. It's open every single day of the year from 9 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock at night. You can use our chat service on the weekends, on a Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night from 10:30 in the evening till 2 o'clock in the morning. That is free, and you access that via our website. And from our website, we have a wealth of information.
Yeah, well, I have to tell you, I'm really glad that we have done this interview, because I have learned way more about TEL than I imagined before coming in. So Vickie, I want to thank you so much for your time, and I'm hoping that if any of you are thinking about counseling, that you definitely reach out either to the Lifeline or to the clinic side, and I'll provide all of the information, so the links and the phone numbers and everything in the description that's below. So thank you so much, Vickie.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.